Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica Sullivan, Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Susquehanna University. Excited to introduce you to some of our faculty and students this evening in departments of Anthropology, Sociology, History, Religious Studies. So before we get started with introductions, I'm just going to give you a couple of housekeeping rules here. So we would really love for you guys to engage with us in the chat function in the webinar. So if you even just want to write in the chat now, let us know what major you're interested in, any questions you hope to have answered by faculty or students throughout the event. We want to make this as interactive as we can in a webinar format. So please feel free to be vocal in that chat function, and we are here to answer whatever questions you might have after giving you a little bit of highlights of each of the departments. So I'm going to hand it off now to Dr. Imhoof for his introduction.
Hi there, my name is David Imhoof, and I am a professor in the history department. I focus on European and cultural history. I am currently serving as the chair of the history department. I also work in our Go office.
And what is a Go office, Dr.
Oh, sorry, I should explain that. Right, yeah, that's a really good question. Go stands for Global Opportunities. The requirement that every student at Susquehanna have some kind of cross-cultural experience. And so I help to facilitate that as well. And the next, I'm going to let my student, Caitlin Gorgoni, introduce herself. She's a history major, a junior history major, and then we will pass it on to some of the other folks here in our meeting.
Hi guys, I'm Caitlin. As Dr. Imhoof said, I'm a junior history major. I also have minors in environmental science, diversity studies, and professional and civic writing. So I also get to be advised by Dr. Bodinger as well. Yeah, that's really about it.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Mann. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Religious Studies. I'm here in my 19th year at Susquehanna. My own areas of research most recently have been in the ethics of violence, but I've also done work on the history of Christian thought and Zen Buddhism in Japan. And I am joined here today by one of my favorite students and religious studies majors, Max Miller. And so, Max, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, like Dr. Mann said, I am a senior religious studies major. I also have a major in history. I'm also pursuing a minor in Africana studies. This is my thesis semester, so I'm working on a project that is rewriting the narrative of Battle of Little Bighorn through contemporary Native American testimony. So that's been a big undertaking, talking with a bunch of different people. So hopefully I'll be able to give some insight as to what upper level research looks like for different departments.
Max, tell me about that project a little.
So I visited the Crow Reservation in Montana in 2016 and got to meet with some tribal elders and learn a little bit about the culture. I also got to visit Little Bighorn Battlefield. So what I'm doing is looking at the traditional narrative of the battle and basically trying to argue that the traditional focus on Custer and the military is not the way we should be approaching the event. So I'm recreating a narrative using interviews that were done between 1900 and 1930 with people who were Native Americans who were at the battle. And then I'm supplementing that with interviews I'm doing with Native students on campus, with tribal elders that I've gotten in contact with to kind of bridge the gap as to why we need to be looking at this in a different light, what the true significance and legacy of the battle should be.
Okay, great. That's interesting. That's cool. I'm John Bodinger de Uriarte. I am a cultural anthropologist and I'm chair of the Sociology and Anthropology department. Part of the reason that I asked Max about his project is that one of my research areas is in contemporary Native America, especially in roles of economy and representation. I've done work on museums and casinos in Native America, talking about different kinds of economic development plans. More recently, some of my research has focused on museums in Iceland. I do one of the Go programs to Iceland. And I was there for a semester teaching at the University of Iceland in Reykjavik. And I've also been doing research and publishing on study abroad as an area and a discipline. Maggie.
Hi, my name is Maggie Riddell, and I am a senior anthropology major. I have minors in women's studies, philosophy, and environmental studies. And I'm also doing my capstone this semester, my senior capstone. I am looking at first-generation college students at Susquehanna University and whether or not their families' experiences and expectations impact their aspirations for going on to graduate school and professional programs, and things of that nature.
Maggie's also kind of a shadow museum studies minor, but not really.
I don't have enough credits, but I'm close.
So, William, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. What would you like to learn about anthropology? I'm responding to somebody's chat. Are they still here?
Well, how about if we finish, why don't we collect some of the questions along
Yes,
the way, and
Sure.
then we'll finish doing some of our little spiel thing, and then we can get into, because if someone asked me what I was interested in learning about anthropology, we could be here all night, John, all night long.
Got no plans, man.
So I want to talk a little bit about the history department, and then my colleagues are going to talk briefly about their departments, and we'll also hear from students so that you can get kind of a good idea of what these departments might be like for you to be in. And I think actually right now is a pretty great time to be a history major. We actually are offering courses on natural disasters and medical history, right? What could be more timely than that? We also got courses that we're offering on work and play in the USA and the Holocaust and the Civil War, and that's just this year alone. So we offer a fair number of, I think, pretty interesting and exciting courses in the history department that really are about helping you kind of get information and explain a situation and maybe think about solutions. So I have a little handy dandy slideshow here, lest you think, and I'm going to share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you make me a host again?
Yes, you should be good now.
And just like that, I am your host. Okay. And now I will share my screen with fabulous imagery. So here's my quick little introduction to the history department. This is Steele Hall. This is where the history department is located. It is, in fact, the most beautiful building on our campus. So this is kind of what we do in the history department is we analyze things. We try to help people take information and figure out answers and give explanations. And then we help students figure out how they can use those skills in a bunch of different kinds of degrees. Not degrees, but jobs. What kind of jobs, you may ask? Well, let me tell you some of the jobs that history majors are doing and have been doing. They work in the Department of Homeland Security. They do work for Navy contracts. Horse racing, that's right. We have somebody who works in Kentucky and regularly runs his horses in the Kentucky Derby. History major, ladies and gentlemen. The Hershey Company, being a financial advisor. We have several people that work in finance. They are often, once they can get themselves interested in numbers, their historical perspective actually really turns out to be very useful for investing. Television and media. We have people who work in various forms of media. Higher education, we have people working, history alums work in a lot of different areas of higher education. So like me, you don't ever have to leave college because it's so great. They work in human resources departments, in insurance companies, and then, of course, history majors also do the things that you might expect. I think a lot of people have certain understandings of what they assume history majors are all headed towards, and that may or may not be the case. But one area that we certainly do train students well to become are high school history teachers, to work in museums, and to work in law. These are some of the kinds of areas that our folks tend to do pretty well in. One of the reasons why our students are able to work in these broad variety of areas is because we have 3 classes that all of our majors take. And in those 3 classes, they work on things like fine-tuning their resume, figuring out how to do job interviews, thinking about the kinds of careers they're interested in. We also partner with our Career Development Center, which is a great organization on our campus, and we work closely with them to help our students find internships. Most of our students hold at least one internship while they are here. We also help connect them with alums. Ultimately, I guess I would really emphasize that history majors are focused on learning particular skills, namely the ability to do research effectively, to analyze lots of information, to synthesize things and be able then to express an argument and express and support their points. And these are skills that, frankly, a lot of employers are really interested in having and set you up as somebody who can work in a bunch of different kinds of fields. So this is an area where we feel like that you have a real leg up on a lot of the people that you might be competing for jobs with. So the final thing I guess I would leave you with is I would like you to know that if you're under the impression that studying history is about memorizing names and dates and facts, please do not come here, because that is not what we do here. We ask our students to think like historians. And historians are, while we seem to be very focused on the past, we actually are doing all of our work in the present, and we're often looking towards the future. And so like this quote says, this is a career, or this is a major that I think could lead you into a lot of different directions, not because it has you focused on the past and obsessing over things and dead people from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but because you use that information to think about how you might do things more effectively in the present and perhaps in the future. So that is it for my little presentation, because really when it comes right down to it, listening to somebody who's been in the field of history for many years and is practically a piece of history himself may not be quite as exciting as hearing from somebody who's currently doing it, and that would be our student Caitlin, who I'm going to turn things over to now to give you a little bit of an introduction from the perspective of a student. Thank you.
All right, hi guys. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience in the history department. I think what really stands out to me about the history department in particular is that it's really, really closely knit. So, you know, I have a really, really great relationship with all of the professors, even the ones who aren't my advisor. And that has led me to get more interested in what they study, and has helped me want to, you know, kind of branch out to what I thought coming in I was interested in. So I think this particularly stands out to me in terms of the African history that we offer at Susquehanna, because coming in to college, I did not have any knowledge of Africa pretty much at all, other than in the lens of colonialism, because it's just simply not covered in most high school curriculums. But coming in, I was able to take African civilization, and that really, really kind of opened my eyes to being able to look at the world from a different perspective, and then led me to be more interested in African culture itself. It's part of the reason I declared my diversity studies minor. And then I ended up taking one of my favorite classes ever that I've taken at college, African literature, through the creative writing department that, or English department that, stands as one of my favorite courses because of what the history department offered to me. Speaking on the classes for the major, Max can probably speak a little bit more on all of them. I've only taken one of the three major classes that build up to your capstone. But I can say that within that class, we did work really, really closely with the Career Development Center in terms of kind of figuring out internships and how you can market your history major past college and past, just the expectations of coming out of it and being a teacher. And I've really just been inspired in general by all of the history professors and the work that they do and how dedicated they are to the work that they do. It's really just inspired me to want to do more and look at more and ultimately, do research after college, go to grad school and kind of build up a repertoire to kind of mirror, the great work that they've done.
Okay, I think we're over to me. Again, my name is Jeff Mann, and I'm the chair of the Religious Studies Department. So our department is also one of those sort of like anthropology that many people have misconceptions about. In our department, we treat the academic study of religion, and that can be historical, that can be textual based, it can be cultural based. And so I think that we have students who come in and take classes in our discipline for different reasons. There are some who are people of religious faith themselves and want to learn more about their own traditions, and they want to learn more about other traditions, and this is a very central part of their life. We have other students who come in and may not identify as distinctly religious, but are very interested in the questions and the issues that religious studies brings up. And so what we've really ended up with in our department, and something that I think is a real strength, is we have two basic trends for our students. I think trend is probably the right word. We have students who are interested in primarily the Judeo-Christian tradition with perhaps plans to go on into the seminary. And we've had a history of preparing students, a long history of preparing students for the ministry, and sent people off into quite a number of programs. And while we have a Lutheran tradition, we have students who are coming from a variety of denominational backgrounds. So we've got that one trend, which has a long history here, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done. And the second trend is students who are more interested in religious studies more broadly conceived. And so they are more likely to sample from a variety of courses, take more courses in Eastern religious traditions, and study religious traditions of a variety of different backgrounds in order to satisfy that particular academic interest. So while we sort of have I wouldn't describe it as two tracks. That would be, there's nothing formal about these tracks, but these are the two major trends I've seen over the years with our students who come through and major in our department. And there's plenty who sort of fit somewhere in between that as well. One of the other things that's often true of our majors is that they are double majors, like Max, who's here, and you heard Max is a double major in religious studies and history, and so he's able to talk conveniently today about both in this time that we're having together. And I think this also sheds light on something about the religious studies discipline that a lot of people don't know, and that is that a lot of what we do is interdisciplinary. So my own background and interests are largely historical, and I've done work on the history of Christian thought, theological history, and this semester Max is in a class that he might want to talk about or might not want to talk about on church history from the early and medieval periods. And so it's a course that satisfies our historical perspectives requirement within the central curriculum, but is a religious studies course. We have other professors doing courses that overlap with literature studies, specifically some of the scriptural studies that we have faculty teaching, and we have courses in other that emphasize other cultures. And so Dr. Duperrin, who's a specialist in ancient Taoism, is teaching courses that intersect with Chinese culture, Japanese culture. And so this is one of the reasons then that I think a lot of students in our department who major in our department are double majors. And it's not that some of them do plan to go on into work in the religious field, for example, going on a seminary to become clergy. But a lot of our majors are people who just ended up in a class, didn't come in planning to do anything with religious studies, ended up in a class and said, hey, this is really interesting. I like the courses, I like the material, I like the professors, and I'm just going to keep taking classes. And so a lot of them end up majoring or minoring because of that. And the different things that they do, I could rattle through a whole bunch of different things that they do with their lives. But that's certainly part of the experience of going to a liberal arts college.
So I will take over for Dr. Mann. So yeah, I've done a bunch of coursework in the religious studies department, mostly on Judeo-Christian tradition, so Judaism, Christianity, a little bit of Islam as well. What really got me interested in religious studies was, like Dr. Mann said, I took a class my freshman year, which was Intro to Religious Studies, and it really gave me a background in kind of more thinking about objective religious theory, why religion works the way it does, what the deal with organized versus unorganized religion, individual practitioner, things like that. So that class we looked at theory from people like Max Weber and Karl Marx, people who you won't necessarily think of as religious types, but they had something to say about how religion affected the world that they lived in, which I thought was really interesting. Other classes I've taken, I've done mostly biblical studies. So I've taken both Hebrew Bible, which is Old Testament, and New Testament. What I will say about those classes is be prepared for your professors to challenge you on traditional views of religious interpretation. So they may have a view, but they will push back on you with all their might, even if they agree with you. So be prepared. I'm also a little bit of a hybrid between the trends that Dr. Mann mentioned. I have taken classes both in Buddhism and in Confucian ethics, just in an effort to grasp the wider ethical and cultural implications that religion and ethical traditions have. Confucianism and Ruism is a little bit weird. It's kind of a religion, kind of an ethical system. I won't get into it too bad. So Intro to Religious Studies is a required class for the major, and then you'll have a capstone. What's nice about the capstone is you can choose to do it in religious studies, but also if you're a double major, the requirement is fulfilled by a capstone from your other major. So you can make your capstone interdisciplinary if you want to. So personally, I'm doing mine in history just because I had a personal vendetta to get this certain project that I'm doing right now done. But I do have friends who are doing religious studies capstones on theodicy and the book of Job, which is basically, if God is all loving and merciful, why do bad things happen? And she's really wrestling with that question. So I think where I'll leave it is the religious studies department is a great place for people who are firm in their faith and want to learn everything that faith has to offer. It's also a great place for people who have a bunch of questions, because your professors aren't just going to give you the questions. You're going to have to go and discover and explore and think for yourself and be prepared to be challenged, definitely. But it's a lot of fun. I very highly recommend it. So thank you.
So I'm a cultural anthropologist, which means that I focus on culture and what culture possibly means. I was just reading something to class this morning, and I came across a fairly decent sort of definition. Culture is everything that human beings have created and transmitted socially over time and space. So it's learned pattern behavior. How do we approach the world? How do we make sense of it? What are the sort of signals and things that we see and we take in? How do we know that we are acting in a particular way? How do we perform our cultural roles? All of that kind of stuff. I don't have a slideshow, but I was looking at the slideshow and it's just like, okay, fine. So one of the things that we teach you is how to argue, right? I think that's a sort of a basic fundamental component that comes out of the discipline, probably comes out of everybody's discipline. How do you build a coherent, compelling argument? We are really focused on writing. The ability to write is stressed in all of our coursework. In terms of thinking about life after college, if you can't write a coherent sentence or a coherent paragraph, it almost doesn't matter where you're working. It's a really important skill that carries across everything. And then, I focus on representation. I run the museum studies program here. I helped put it together, I don't know, like 5 years ago. We have a number of different minors that are also anthropology majors, museum studies minors. And as Caitlin suggested, the diversity studies minor also comes out of this department. So we've got a bunch of stuff: anthropology, sociology, diversity, museum studies. A lot of what unites it is a kind of multidisciplinary sort of approach to different kinds of questions. A lot of what sort of floats my theoretical boat, if you will, are questions of representation. And we can think about this both in terms of like political representation, but we can also think about it in terms of representation in spaces like museums or on slideshows. David, your picture of the most beautiful building on campus is dated. It's got a tree, a catalpa tree that no longer exists, and it's been replaced by a longleaf magnolia, which isn't quite as impressive as a canopy, but yeah, so notice stuff like that, right? So it's about paying attention to stuff around you. And I sometimes say that what anthropology and sociology do is allow you to listen to somebody say something, or look at the news, or look at some stream of information that's coming toward you, and one of your first questions may be, who says, right? On what cultural authority is that being predicated? How do we approach the questions? How do we approach the argument that somebody's making, and use the tools that we learn in our coursework here to kind of pull them apart, right? Not necessarily to destroy them or set them on fire, but to see, what are they doing here? What are the pressures that are being exerted? What are the limits that are being suggested? How does it normalize stuff and make it seem to be common sense? How does it go against that commonsensical understanding? And that's part of what we do, right? We've got a number of different placements in graduate schools, coming out of the department, everywhere from NYU to Columbia to Stanford. We also have a number of students that have gone on to work in museums, that have worked at the Smithsonian, that have worked at the American Anthropological Association, that have gone on to work for universities, that have worked in the Peace Corps. So we prepare students to think about a lot of cultural differences that exist in the world, and how to navigate their way into both understanding those, right, and making their way through them. So you can see also it's connected to some of the ideals of the GO program, right? I teach a program that goes to Iceland. I teach another program that goes to Morocco. And in the past, I've taught a program that goes to the Galapagos. Each one of them kind of focuses on questions of development, questions of sustainability, but there are also these sort of extended, immersive contacts with other cultures and other peoples. And on that note, I'll segue into Maggie, who survived a GO program with me.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that Dr. Bodinger just listed that I wanted to touch on if I can real quick. One of the main draws of anthropology for me is who says, says who. One of the main tenets of anthropology is cultural relativism, which is the idea that you shouldn't judge other cultures by your own culture standards. And this is something that I understood theoretically. Once I learned it, it's not a super hard concept to understand. But the first time it really hit me, and I was really able to wait, this is what this means, was actually my sophomore year of school. Like I said previously, I'm a senior this year. So I got to do research my sophomore year in an evangelical church. I was taking religious fundamentalisms, which is a course with one of the other anthropology professors. And I got to participate in participant observation, where I was going to church services, not undercover, not everyone knew I was there. Everyone knew I was a student doing research. And I just asked questions, and I, involved myself in the ceremonies, and I went to different meetings, and I went to maybe 15 or 20 meetings throughout the spring semester that year. And that's when it really hit me, because my question was something that from a secular Western point of view, you know, has a very clear answer. But once you experience it, you know, I can only experience it so much because I'm not, you know, fully a part of this community. But once you experience it, even as an outsider, you kind of get a better idea of, this means something different. This has a different meaning to it when you look at it from within the confines of that culture, so cultural relativism. But also to touch briefly on the GO program, I went to Morocco with Dr. Bodinger in June of 2019 for my GO program. This was a 3.5 week-ish course, so trip, I guess would be a better term. But this is a Go short. It's considered a Go short. It was really another example of kind of participant observation in a bit different way, because it wasn't, you know, as research oriented. There were elements of research, but it wasn't as research oriented. But just being in a culture so radically different than one that I've ever been in before, or one that I'm used to. So.
Thank you.
All right, so I just wanted to jump in because I know we had a student sign on. So I just want to reiterate, if anyone has questions of our attendees, of anybody on the panel, please feel free to write in. Even if it's not necessarily about their department, but Susquehanna, I mean, they are your experts. So anything, if it comes to mind, please, you know, go ahead and put that in the chat. That's what we're here for. I think a question that came to my mind just as you all were talking, and one that I get from students a lot, is the question of how easy or hard is it to double major? So if somebody wants to address, like, because I talk to students often and they think, oh, I can only have one, but could Max, maybe if you wanted to lead that, just talk about how do you double major, and is it hard or easy or common or not?
So I think Susquehanna does a great job with fostering a community where double majoring is more the norm. I think we have a lot of students that double major from my experience, and the school makes it as simple as they can. Double majoring is, you know, not the simplest thing in the world by nature, as people struggle sometimes to get through a single major in 4 years, depending on the nature. In my experience, history and religious studies go really well together. A lot of courses overlap, concepts overlap as well. So from my experience, it's very easy, especially with the way the capstone works. For other people, it might be a bit more difficult, but my girlfriend is double majoring in psychology and creative writing. So you really don't have any bounds. She wants to become a psychiatrist and do child creative writing therapy, and that's really what she wants to do. So you pick and choose and you make it work. So when you double major, you get a faculty advisor from both departments. So I am advised by Dr. McMillan in the history department, and by Dr. Martin, a contemporary of Dr. Mann's, in the religious studies department. And they really help me pick classes, make sure I'm keeping on track. They communicate with my help between each other to make sure I'm fulfilling all my requirements and I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket per se. And then you have, I mean, online, you have full access to your degree audit, which keeps track of all your credits and your classes and what fulfills what credits. And the registrar's office that runs and keeps that up and running is always available by email and for appointment to keep you on track. So from my experience, double majoring really is not something you should be afraid of. I think it's definitely something all students should explore if they're interested. An added kind of motivation for you is I'm actually doing a dual degree, which means instead of one degree with 2 majors on it, I'm getting 2 separate Bachelor's of Arts degrees. And that is a total of 156 credits instead of 126 credits to graduate. I did transfer in almost 20 credits from high school, so you will have to overload if you don't have as many transfer credits, but it's definitely doable, and I'm still gonna graduate in 4 years. So especially if you're only doing a double major, not a dual degree, it's definitely doable if you guys are interested. I hope that helps.
Super helpful. Thank you, Max. I appreciate it. And I'll keep showing this recording to every student who asks me, because you did such a great job answering that question for our students. Maybe if the faculty members on the panel could talk a little bit about how academic advising works in your departments, and kind of what your relationship is with students who are your advisees. Are you accessible? How do they get in touch with you if they need your help?
I'm frighteningly accessible. So, in the beginning of the semester, incoming as a new student, you'll be introduced to the department, you'll be introduced to your advisor. This used to work differently pre-COVID, but now it's all Zooming and remote. With that advisor, you will look at what your path through the major is going to be and what your path in satisfying central curricular requirements may be. You can also talk with them about the possibility of double majoring or what kind of minors you might also want to add on to that. I hold regular office hours. Right now I have regular Zoom office hours. I am here all the time and my door is pretty much always open. And I have a chair that's, once I set it up, it's like 10 feet away from where I'm sitting. So you can actually come in and have like a person-to-person with distance conversation with me about questions that you might have.
I keep hoping that I can find a way to convince some student to walk around the track with me and do an advising meeting while walking. That hasn't happened yet, because all of us are struggling with how we interact with each other when we're used to these kinds of personal interactions. I think that it's safe to say that there's not a department on this campus where you aren't going to be welcomed as a student, as a person, as a colleague, as an intellectual equal, as somebody that we are interested in learning from you. We don't become professors so that we can just profess and talk with you about all the fabulous things that we know. Who knows? These could be fake books behind me.
They are fake.
They're all fake. And people always ask me, how many of those fake books have I read? And the thing is, that's not why we're here. I mean, we do like to accumulate knowledge and to learn things, but we really like to learn from you as well. And I think that in some ways that kind of interaction really underscores how all of us want to interact with students. And you've heard from two of the three people on this panel, and eventually Caitlin will do this too, that all of our students have a capstone project. So that's only one guaranteed moment when you're going to work very closely with an advisor, with somebody else. But I would say most of our students have other moments along the way where they work very closely with a particular advisor. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, if you're watching this now, you're interested in Susquehanna. And I can tell you that from the faculty perspective, that's one of the things we're interested in too. That's something that I think students and faculty really share, is a desire to get to know each other, to learn from each other, and maybe to build something together, whether it's how a major takes shape, or a senior thesis, or a website, or a podcast series. I think that those are things that are really important. And I think you've heard that from all of us, that we're not just here to tell you things, but we're here to work with you as intellectual equals. And I think that's a really important aspect for sure in my department. And I know these two guys very well as also, and I think that I could say that across the board at Susquehanna, that's something that we all value very much.
I can hop in real quick and talk on this as well, just because I came into Susquehanna undecided, very, very undecided. And as you can tell by my 3 minors, I am still undecided, but I came in undecided, and I heard English literature, which is very different than anthropology. And I went to my undecided advisor. I said, hey, I think I want to do English literature. And literally in that meeting, he pulled out the directory and dialed the phone number of the woman who I'm. And then like I set up a meeting with her and everything was fine. And I was a literature major for about a semester and a half. And then I said, this might not be it for me. So I went to my advisor and I said, hey, your department's great, but it's not great for me. And we sat down and we went through list after list after list of classes available and things I was potentially interested in. For a while, I was going to make my own major. And then that ended up just falling through. And so I set up appointments with the help of my English literature advisor with like the head of different departments I was interested in. I had an appointment with poli-sci and philosophy and Dr. Bodinger for anthropology, or it might have been Dr. Jacobson, someone from anthropology. I had an advisor, a meeting with someone from like language studies, a whole bunch of different people. And I just met with the head of the departments and said, here's what I'm interested in. Do you think this could be, this can carry through in your department? And even though I didn't, stay in all those departments or anything, I still have contacts with all of these people, my undecided advisor, my English literature advisor, like that. My academic path would not have been possible if it was not for the relationship between professors, advisors, and students. So I think very highly of the professors in that aspect.
Great. So another question I was thinking of as we were looking at your slideshow, Dr. Imhoof, is just, you mentioned the Career Development Center, which is obviously a key piece of relationships. But can either faculty or students talk about how does that internship process work? Like, so there are internships, but where does that start? Is that something that faculty are connecting students with? Is that, like, how do those things happen in your own departments? And how early would you say you see students actually having full internship opportunities during their Susquehanna career?
An internship at a museum or some other sort of exhibitionary place, like a national park office or someplace else, is mandatory for the museum studies minor. And we have been working for years to build up a library of possible internships. And have managed to place students in some really good ones. The Natural History Museum in New York, Penn Museum, Gallery, the Orishi Gallery in New York as well. And in the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, right now we have an intern. So we share information with the Career Development Center. We point students toward that. We have internships that are more local, smaller, more local museums on the gallery here on campus. And then we have internships that students do over the summer. You do either a 2-credit or a 4-credit internship that contributes to the credit load for museum studies. We have less internships currently in anthropology and sociology, but that can change as we change our focus a little bit more. I did want to circle back to one thing really quickly that Maggie said, and we went by it fairly quickly. She said that at one point she was considering designing her own major. That's possible. I have directed self-designed majors before. The last one was in visual anthropology, which there isn't enough here to actually, I teach a course in it that only makes like once every 3 years, but it is a pretty interesting field in anthropology. And the student that I worked with, we pulled together a number of different courses across the disciplines and built her own major in visual anthropology. So that is a possibility. It means that you work fairly closely with an advisor, somebody that helps you sort of design and directs the major. But yeah, that's another thing.
Can you just describe for those of us who are curious, what is visual anthropology?
Visual anthropology is a couple different things. One is that sort of visual technologies get connected to anthropological fieldwork and have increased in anthropological fieldwork over time. So from early view cameras and glass plates to contemporary sort of digital video and digital imaging. So part of it is methodological, right? What tool do you put in your toolkit to go out and study the bongo bongo. Well, maybe you'll put in a camera there. Then the other part is also, how do you read images, right? How do you look at images and pull out of those images different kinds of cultural clues so you can make sort of cultural interpretations. I can look at David Imhoof in his office right now, right? I can see his wicker settee. I can see all of his books. I can see his plant that's kind of like staked up in the window place there. I can kind of connect this to a whole discursive kind of realm of visual imagery that speaks professor, right? And then we can kind of engage with that, and we can say, okay, so here's a picture from this guy's office. How do we sort of interpret this and read this? So that's another direction to go.
Well,
Not meaning to leave you out, Jeff. I could read your office as well. I promise.
Starting to make me nervous now on what you're going to be looking at when we have these Zoom meetings.
Well, Maggie and I had this whole project we were putting together this summer that was all about Zoom meetings and all about how do you sort of, I hate to use this word because it's really overused right now, but how do you curate your background to signal whatever you want to signal in your Zoom meeting, right? Where do you set up your camera? What do you have in the background? Do you use a fake background? Do you use a real background? And then how can you look at, you know, all of the stuff that's in your office and use it to kind of figure out, oh, okay, what's going on in here? It was an interesting project.
well, and one of the things I would also mention to kind of jump off of what John is saying is I'm not going to read his background, though I have thoughts.
I'm glad you have thoughts.
I have thoughts, but I think that one of the things that I would emphasize that I think a lot of people would find to be really interesting about the things you would study in all three of these fields, it might not be quite what you expect. And they might not be the things that you expect to study when you start college, right? Most people think there's going to be a lot of texts and there's going to be a lot of books. And certainly, I think all three of these majors really emphasize your ability to understand text and to be able to express yourself about them. And that's really important. But I do think that in a lot of these, in all three of these majors, you would find that you'd be studying things that you might not necessarily expect to be studying. All kinds of examples of, for sure, you know, Dr. Bodinger has talked about different kinds of visual anthropological evidence that you might study in his field. And I think that you would do very much the same. Before we started, we were talking about music, and I use a lot of music in the work that I do, not only in my own research, but also in my classes. And it's not just, you know, sort of window dressing to kind of introduce people or ease them into the class, but it actually is a part of the way that I think about the past, and a way that helps me give students connection to the past. And so I think that, you know, visual images, material objects, those are all things that you would be studying in these three disciplines that I think sometimes when you start off college, you don't necessarily expect. And I think, honestly, when you walk into a class and you're pretty quickly confronted with something that is a little bit different than what you expect, that you might be asked, well, you know, go study some podcasts as a part of your research for this class. I think that a lot of times students are like, okay, that's challenging my assumption about what I'm supposed to be doing in a way that makes me think differently, makes me think about how I might be able to do those same sorts of things. And to me, that's one of the real benefits of what we do.
Oh, that wasn't supposed to be the panelist. That was supposed to be a response to a student. My bad. I think one of the things that you said that reminded me of, you teach a class, or the department offers a class on war or specific wars, right? Or specific aftermaths of wars. Jeff, you talked about a class on war as well, or on violence. Yeah, and I teach a class on war and organized violence. So there's a lot of crossovers, right? So there's a lot of subjects that we take different perspectives on, but that we also encourage different ways of thinking about, right? So that you're not just going to go to a history class to learn the history of World War II, and that's going to be your only perspective. You may also use it as a way to think about thermonuclear warfare. You may use it as a way to think about religious practice or response to or recovery from. And all of these things kind of come together in shared perspectives and intersections that, I don't know, I think they're kind of interesting. And it means that you're not moving from silo to silo. You're not moving from bubble to bubble, right? You can see the connections that are going on in your coursework across all the different things. So some students say, oh my God, there's a central curriculum. I have to take these classes that I have no interest in whatsoever. First of all, you could stumble into a class like Dr. Mann said at one point and realize, oh my God, I had no idea what this was about. This is totally cool. I'm going to study this, right? Or you realize how things are connected, right? That's part of one of the real benefits of a liberal arts college education is that we're small enough and we're teaching centered enough, and by and large we're collegial enough. I'm not quite sure about Dr. Imhoof, but we're collegial enough that we can cooperate and collaborate in ways that are meaningful.
I'd like to kind of build off of that actually really quick, just with more of a specific example. I'm actually not taking any history courses this semester, surprisingly enough, but I am taking classes where I look and all of the skills that I get from my history classes really do apply to these. So most people, when they go into science, especially environmental science, like I mentioned, I'm an environmental science minor, they're focused on the math and science aspect of it. And I'm able to come into these classes and bring my history aspect onto it and kind of map a pathway of how we got from one place to another. And there is also a surprising amount of history in looking at environmental science, because one of my classes really emphasizes a quote. I don't know who said it, but it's about uniformitarianism. The past is, the key to the future, and the present is the key to the past. So you really have to look at that historical aspect. So it stretches not only from, the departments that are represented in this panel, but to really all of the departments on campus, where you can really take what you're learning and apply it to any other class that you're in.
Maggie and Max in particular, since you guys are in your senior years, do you want to share a little bit about kind of how you envisioned or who you envisioned yourself when you first started at Susquehanna and what this 4 years looks like? And I think we're dealing with majors and topics here that do kind of delve into like kind of upturning the things that we've learned or you've felt or you've processed. And that's, I think, the beauty of these departments, but you had to grapple with some things throughout the year. So how did that work for you? And what do you find as the support system at Susquehanna that's allowed you to kind of go through this stuff and discover some things in your own way?
Maggie's gonna let me go first. Okay. So I, like Maggie, came in undeclared as well. I think that if you don't know exactly what you want to do coming into college, coming in undeclared is the best thing you can do for your life ever. So I declared history fall of my sophomore year, so late by the traditional kind of college route. And I didn't declare religious studies until spring of sophomore year. So really kind of a semester to a year behind what people would technically think of as when you should declare a major. So coming in undeclared, I really kind of envisioned myself taking classes in a bunch of different departments. My parents were both college graduates. My dad in construction management, my mom is a master in psychology. So really academia was not a foreign concept to me. So I definitely felt comfortable in kind of knowing how to kind of traverse the terrain, which is very helpful. Now after 4 years, I've taken classes in a bunch of different departments. I've taken psychology classes, I've taken anthropology classes, obviously history and religious studies, English. I also play in the orchestra, so I've taken music surveys in like jazz and things like that. And where I'm at now and what these 4 years have done for me, I think, is I have a much more theoretical and conceptual view of the world. When you're in high school, it's about facts, it's about answers, it's about getting through the year, it's about getting to that next step. In college, it's about taking a step back and saying, how did I get to that next step? How do we push the conversation forward? How do we connect with people and learn things, not necessarily through a screen, but through, you know, talking with people and learning about their culture and their worldviews and allowing ours to change. So from high school, I think I very much bought into there's an answer and a narrative to history, and there's dates and there's people, and you need to know them, and that's important. And 4 years later now, obviously I'm doing a project that is kind of borderline calling European settlers out for colonizing native lands, which is something I never thought I would really be exploring. And then in religion also, I always bought into, yeah, the church is the truth, and, you know, thinking about seminary and going into ministry. And now 4 years later, I'm still thinking about maybe going into seminary and ministry, but I'm figuring out that the people who are going into seminary and ministry are not the ones that believe everything that the faith tells them. They're the ones that have the most questions about what they want to do and how they want to get there. So I think these 4 years for me have been really formative in thinking about the world through different lenses. And as Dr. Bodinger said, kind of the intersections between different lifestyles, different cultures, different people, and how we kind of have to navigate that.
I can talk on my experience kind of in that aspect if you want, but I mean, I agree with everything Max said. So if there's something else you wanted to cover, we can do that too.
No, I think we're down to our last minute. So I don't know if anybody has anything final they would like to mention that didn't get mentioned, but certainly, you know, I'm opening the floor for this minute or any advice you have for our young scholars who are joining us.
I'll just suggest to William Booley, and I hope that I didn't slaughter your last name, that if you have questions that you want to pursue with me, just send me an email. I'd be happy to respond. And anybody else who's out there potentially listening to this who's interested in anthropology or Susquehanna or Selinsgrove or whatever, yeah, drop me a line and I'll send you an answer.
I'd like to just say real quick, like, don't be afraid to, you know, because I came in declared history. Don't be afraid to do that if that's what you're interested in. People ask me all the time, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Literally get asked it probably once a week at least. And, you know, even if I don't know fully, like I know I want to do research, I know I might want to be a professor at some point, but nothing is set in stone. But what I do know is that I love what I do and I love what I'm studying. And that's what matters most right now, because these, you know, you're supposed to like what you're doing and you want to like what you're doing. So just don't be afraid to, you know, actually explore your passion.
I just had one more thing to say. If any of the people watching, if you guys haven't come to campus for tour yet and you're interested, Caitlin and I both work in the admissions office. So when you call or schedule an appointment for your tour, you can request us and they will tell you when we work. And that way you can get like specific questions answered from us as well, if that's an interest or helpful to anybody.
Funnily enough, got scheduled for an anthropology tour while we were giving this panel.
Awesome. And it used to be that students could come and sit in on classes. I'm not quite certain what our policy is about that, but the classrooms are a little bit sparse with humanity these days. But if you decide to schedule a tour and it's a day that that I'm around, and as I said, I'm around all the time, and you want to talk to me directly or at 10 feet distance or whatever makes sense to you, we can try to do that as well.
All right, so I want to thank everybody. So thank you, faculty, thank you, students. This has been awesome. We've recorded it, so if you want to go back and rewatch it, learn all that exciting information again, that would be awesome. So it will be available too for anybody who wants to see it. William, if you want to share it with family, friends, and otherwise who are also eager to learn about anthropology and everything Susquehanna, we're all about that. So as Caitlin and Max said, we are open for tours. So if there are specific faculty you want to meet with, talk to, let us know or contact them directly. But thank you, everyone. Stay well and have a great evening.